Hi everybody. I'm a little bit hoarse this evening. I'm going to try to make this kind of quick, but I don't want to give it short shrift. So beginning this week, we're going to actually be, instead of answering questions that I made up to help understand whether you got the reading, we're going to actually be using this chapter write-up template that you see in the middle of the screen here. And I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible, but I'm sorry, it's going to be just me talking and these boring Word documents. So I apologize for that. But this write-up is going to be how you're going to write up every chapter that you read out of the book between now and something like, I don't know, week 12 or 13. And each of these write-ups will be part of your final report that you put together for your client organization. The idea is that this write-up is a summary of the book chapter. So I'm going to show you my sample, which you can also pull down in the course content folder. And you can see that I took about 40 pages of chapter 2, or however many pages it was, and I condensed it into 3 pages. And that's what you're going to be doing by pulling out the main points. You know what happens when you read something in a textbook, basically there's some main point and then they talk about it, right? So they make some claim and then they give 3 reasons why that claim is true. And for each of those reasons, they, give a bunch of explanation. So our task is to pull out the main reasons and slap them in here and then give kind of the Reader's Digest version of why this is important, and then what the best practices are for volunteer management, all of which is in the book. The trick is going to be to figure out what those are. The good news is that if you take a pencil, or if you're either writing in the book or if you're reading it digitally, you're making some notes as you go. And every time you read something that you think this sounds like a main point, you jot it down. Then when you are done, really all you need is somewhere between 3 and 6, depending on the chapter, main points, however many they put out there. And probably you'll have more main points than that. So you'll just have to look at them and you'll see, oh, well, here's 3 things that I wrote down that all kind of about the same thing. I'll just combine those into one, right? Okay, so let's just see how I did this. Your blank chapter write-up looks like 3 little questions, right? And that's what it is, 3 little questions. But in fact, by the time you get done, these 3 questions are going to turn into 3 pages. All right. Or more or less, depending on what you get out of the book, but that's what it turned into for me. I wrote up chapter 5 for you. So let's go down here. I'm going to pick something up that you can't see because it's off the screen. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to come up here and paste it. All right. This is the topic of the chapter 5, okay? This is the topic. It's recruiting, finding and recruiting the right people to your volunteer position. Okay, so what are the main issues that your organization needs to be aware of? I'm going to come down here and see if I can, oops, I got ahead of myself here, find them. I pulled 5 issues out of this chapter 5. I'm going to just copy those. Let's go back up here, pretend like that other part isn't down there, and I'm going to paste it in. Okay, so look here. What are the issues to be aware of? So I have a little explanation. It says recruiting volunteers who are a good match for the organization requires you to think about both the needs of the recruit and of the organization. And then I say several issues have to be addressed while you're thinking about that. And of course, that's not word for word what I wrote, but just to paraphrase. So what I got out of the whole chapter was, when you're recruiting, you have to think about what does the recruit want, because if you can offer it to him, the recruit's going to come. But you also have to think about what does the organization need, because if you don't offer it in a way that will get the right people, you're going to be sorry, right? So that makes sense. You have to think about a good match, a match between what the recruit wants and what the organization needs. If those things overlap, you've got a good recruit. All right, so that's this sentence right here that I basically said. This seems to be the main thing that I got if I had to come up with one overriding idea, what I got out of the chapter, that's it. Now, besides that one overriding idea, they seem to make 5 points, all right? I actually don't like my first point. I think I must have written it when I was very tired because it's not that understandable. But it says understanding the skill sets necessary. I'm just going to take this out because I don't even know what I meant by it. For the specific volunteer jobs to be filled. All right, so that's one thing, understanding the skill sets necessary for the specific volunteer job to be filled. If you don't really understand what the person who's going to fill the job needs to know or needs to be able to do, how are you going to advertise the job well enough or specifically enough to get the right people to say, oh yeah, that's me, or hey, that's not me. Yeah, so you need to understand that, and so on and so forth. Each of these is a main thing that I learned from the chapter, understanding what motivates recruits who might be attracted to your mission. So, for example, if you're looking for, if you're big brothers, big sisters, probably a thing that's going to motivate is that they like working with children, right? So you got to know that. And then matching the way you recruit to the people you are recruiting. If you are trying to recruit coaches, you're not going to go to garden clubs. You're going to go to, gyms and rec centers and places where you might find people who are interested in sports. In other words, that's common sense, right? Find the place where those people are likely to be. Fourth is framing and delivering your message. In other words, let's say you were looking for, I don't know. Let's say you were back, the big brothers, big sisters. You're looking for people who to do that. The way you might frame that is if you enjoy working with children and want to make a real difference in the life of a child that needs some additional adult interaction, this is going to be a great job for you. That's basically appealing to their desire to work with children and the fact that they would actually make an important difference in their lives. The wrong way to do that would be to say we're looking for a bunch of men and women who are willing to give some time 4 times a month. What does that tell them? How does that appeal to them? It just doesn't. So maybe none of you would have done that, but I'm just pointing out how you can frame a message differently. Okay, so and then the last item down here, thing 5, is to provide a point of contact and engagement. And the reason for that, as we will find out later, is because if a recruit knows who they're talking to, makes it easier for them, but also they can form a bond with their point of contact, and that makes them feel more involved and part of the organization, having that relationship, and keeps them on board longer most of the time. Okay, so now that is part 2. So you see part 1, very short. Part 2, whatever your main points are that you got out of that chapter. It could be 3 main points. It could be 8 main points. It will depend on the chapter, and it will depend on what you think is important. I want to just say, do not use all of their headings as important points, because part of the reason they break it up the way they do is because it is very difficult for people to read things that are very long and just type. And people's eyes get tired. They don't want to read it. And so what publishers do actually is they break things up into short sections, and then they put a heading on the section. It's an eye break. It's a brain break. It psychologically helps people move through, oh, this little short thing, I can get through it. Oh, this little short thing. Plus the heading gives a cue to them what to be looking for and helps them focus. In other words, it's not necessarily all main points why they put the headings there. So don't necessarily use every heading. And if you do, instead of having 5 main points or 6 main points or 3 main points, you will end up with about 20. So you have to discriminate which of those headings, perhaps, if any of them, is what you're really learning here. And like I did when I got done with the whole thing, it wasn't any of the headings. It was basically, okay, they're trying to tell me that I have to match what the recruit is looking for with what the organization needs. It didn't say that anywhere, but after I read the thing, I realized that's what they were talking about. So you're going to be using your judgment here. Okay, here's thing 5. why are each of these issues important and what is the best practice? All right, so what you're going to do basically is you're going to take each of these things. So let's just copy this. I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it right down here. Now, I'm going to go back into the book and I'm going to find what they said about all this stuff. Now, it turns out that I've already done this. So let me just pick this up. The noise of snoring that you hear in the background is one of 5 dogs I happen to have at my house today. I have my 2 grand dogs. I have a foster dog, and I have my own 2 dogs. So somebody's snoring, one of the big ones. Okay, so let's, oops. All right, so let's see what we got. So I brought this down. We're going to bring all of these down one at a time. I brought this one down first. Here it is right here. Again, we're back to this idea, understanding the skills sets necessary for specific volunteer jobs to be filled. Okay, the first thing I've got to do in part 3 is take that down and then say why. Well, making a position seem appealing to recruit is best done by explaining how the volunteer job will meet a critical need or further your organization's mission. And if you can appeal to the importance of the specific job to make specific difference, then people are more likely to become enthusiastic about helping. Ways to do that are to describe the job activities in the societal or individual need the position will help your organization meet, and so forth. I'm not going to read all this to you. But then when you get done with that, you're going to, I feel like there's a non-match here somewhere. I feel like I maybe picked up the wrong things, but hang on, let's see. Then you're going to bring down the next one. And then you're going to go back to the book. In this case, I'm going down to something I already wrote. Here's this one. This is about motivation. I'm just going to copy it. I obviously went through the book and did this. I'm starting to think I must have done it in the middle of the night because a lot of what I wrote feels like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me right now, but forgetting about that for a minute. I'm just trying to show you how to put this section together. So you go back into the book. Why did you think that this understanding the characteristics and motivators of individuals who might be attracted to your mission and to the volunteer jobs to be filled was important? Well, why is because discovering the motivation of potential volunteers is important to good recruiting. And then it says why. I pulled that out of the book. And then what? So these are the best practices that I also pulled out of the book. Think about whether the position requires certain skill sets or hobbies skills, or if it just needs a warm body. And by professional skills, hobby skills, warm body, you can know, why they want to do it. Do they want to put their skills to use, or do they want to do something different than they would normally do during their day? Anyway, you're going to let potential volunteers know what it is that they need to bring with them in terms of skills so that they can match their own motivation. Oh, I don't want to do that. I do that all day. Or, oh, I have that skill. I'd like to bring it. It's going to be depending on what they care about. So you got to put that out there. And then think about the benefits of the job and what sort of persons or groups of people would be interested in those benefits, and describe the benefits in your recruiting material. Okay, so that's thing B. All of these are best practices that I pulled out of the reading, and I typed them up. So I would keep doing that with each of these. So far I've done this one, and this why and what, and then I've done thing 2 and why and what, and you notice this one only had 2. I only had 2 what's to do out of that whole chapter, or that whole section. This one I have 4. When I get done, actually, if you look down here, let's go all the way past that one with my notes in it. Let's get rid of this yellow stuff so that you can see what it's actually going to look like. All right, So this is what it will look like when it's done. Recruiting, chapter 5. Recruiting, this is thing 1 right here. This is all of thing 1, remember? Finding and recruiting the right people to your volunteer positions. This is thing 2. This is all of question 2 right here. Those 5 ideas that I pull out. And then thing 3 is I literally took each one of these things down from this section here, one at a time, and I put why and then what. And you'll notice from up here, you don't put why and what. You could, I guess, if you wanted, but I took them out because that was just a cue for you. But then for each of those, here they are. In the end, there are 16. Now let's talk about what's going to happen. Let me talk about for a minute what's going to happen later when you get your organization. All right, so this piece of paper, this is section 1. This will be section 1 of your report. So basically what you're going to have is for each chapter, all right, so you're going to have a Reader's Digest verse for each chapter. So let's pretend like you've got chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. I'm getting to chapter 5, 4, chapter 5. All right, here we are. So when you get to chapter 5, you will have, and actually for each of these chapters, you will have main idea. Hang on a second. I don't know if you can see it, but my sunset thing just happened on my computer. All right, main idea, which you saw was recruiting is the main topic, finding and blah. Okay, so that was the main idea. Then we get the 5 main points. Okay, I don't remember what they were, but we'll just call them A, whoops, B, C, D, E. Okay, remember there were 5. Now, under each of these, if you'll recall, oops, let's see if I can figure out a way to show you this. Well, let's get over here. Okay, so if you'll recall, in this case, there were 2 of them, or whatever there were. And in this case, bear with me, it will all make sense in a while. In this case, I think there were 4 of them, right? There were 4 little points behind the second one. All right, so I'm not going to do them all, but when you get done, this is what chapter 5 will look like. Chapter 5 will have 3 parts. And part 1 will be this stuff, all right? Part 2, and you obviously can't do any of this until you get your organization, but just so you know, part 2 will be what our organization is doing currently. Okay, so maybe in this case, we were talking about recruiting, right? So maybe in this case, maybe they have, let's see, my sister, okay, not my sister, the executive's sister works in the office, and we draw from the families of our clients to staff fundraisers. Okay, so that's what they're doing. They may have a much more involved recruiting process, but they may just have that. So you've got that whole big thing, right, that was 3 pages. Or, I mean, maybe you haven't seen that it was 3 pages, but it was 3 whole pages, just this part 1, right? This whole part 1 was 3 whole pages. Now you've got, oops, why is it doing that? All right, so now you've got part 2, and in my case down here, It's like one sentence. It might be a paragraph. You should tell as much as you know about what they're doing. Then you're going eventually to go to part 3, which is consultant, which will be you, recommendations. All right, now, if you recall, altogether, these points right here, there were 16 of them between these 5 ideas. You can't see all this. Let me see if I can bring this down. All right, so here we are. What's my organization is currently doing? The executive sister work. This is all of part 2. It might be just that long, and the other thing was 3 pages. Now you've got all of these ideas to support each of these 5 concepts that we talked about earlier. Here's your recommendations. You would do more than this, because the fact that the executive sister works in the office, that is ambient recruiting, or concentric, actually it's concentric circle recruiting, because the executive pulled the person from their family. So executive's a sister. So you would put that in there somehow. Was recruited by concentric circle recruiting, which is, and then you've probably already explained it above, but you might just want to repeat it, and works in the office. And then down here you would say, and the organization uses ambient recruiting, which is, and you've already said it above. You'll see if you go and find my sample, from which they draw from, or let's see. That's not right. Sorry about this. I'm writing as I go. Okay, so drawing from the families of our clients. All right, so when you go look at my thing, you'll see that in one of these areas, it explains what kind of recruiting you can use. That's the best practices. And so here I'm saying the sister was recruited using concentric circle recruiting, which is blah, 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 and works in the office. And the organization uses ambient recruiting, which is some other thing, drawing from the families of our clients to staff fundraisers. And I'm not going through all that. Okay, so now you know that so far the only thing they do are those 2 things. But if you were to count up all these bullet points under your final part 1, you would notice that there are 16. Obviously, I haven't typed them all out here just to save you from having to watch me do that. But they use 2, concentric and ambient recruiting, and there are 16. Your recommendations are going to come from your group knowing everything there is to know about that organization and what would be good for them, and brainstorming out what the best use of those 16 supporting points are. It's unlikely that all 16 of them are going to be appropriate for your client, but maybe 5 of them or 7 of them or 3 of them would be that they're not already using. So your recommendation is going to say something like, we recommend that XYZ or organization add, blah, 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 recruiting, and then you would basically say why. All right, so you're going to tell them what else you think they should do and why. And when you get done, you will have, I think I've got you reading 12 chapters. So you will have 12 sections that will go together as a report in the order that you read them, because we're going right through the book from the beginning of thinking about what you're going to do, and then all the way through supervising and appreciating and all that kind of stuff. So you will have 12 different chapters, if you will, or 12 different sections of your report. And I will tell you something. The class last year, I thought, did a very good job of coming up with these recommendations, because they knew enough about the organization to make some good, solid, thoughtful, creative recommendations. But even if you didn't, it wouldn't matter, because what you've given them in this part 1 is a summary of a best practices textbook. And even if they get nothing else, when they read that, they'll have more information than they did before they started. And I'm sure they will get useful ideas from you. Maybe everything won't seem like something that they want to use, but a lot of it will be useful. But you are doing them a favor by helping them get the best practices in volunteer management in a very short read. They don't have to read the whole book. They just read your Reader's Digest outline that you will be putting together. Okay, that's it for this video. I'm sorry that it was 25 minutes of looking at a Word document and listening to me talk, but if you get this right, and I'm sure the first couple of times you may need some help or it may feel difficult, but you're going to be doing it the same way over and over again. And I think once you get the hang of it, it will get easier. If you have any problems at all, you may visit me in my office. We can have Google Hangouts, Facebook chat, Skype. We can talk on the phone, whatever works for you. I really want to help you get it right. So also, the TA and I, her name is Rang. You can meet her by looking at her pictures and stuff on the blackboard. She and I both are going to be working to actually give you some feedback in writing on your writing so that you will have that as well. Okay, that's it. And I will see you in the next video, I guess. And take care and have a good night.